You do the welcome today.
Okay.
And it begins.
And here he is. Welcome to Charting Change in Legal. I'm one of your hosts, Caroline Hill, Editor-in-Chief of Legal IT Insider, and I'm joined by my esteemed co-host,
Ari Kaplan, a principal, actually, yes, I am the principal of Ari Kaplan Advisors. My mother-in-law always says, Ari, who are the other advisors? And I'm always like, I'm sorry, it's me, but I aspire, which is why I made it plural. But
I
anyway,
love that. I
I'm an
love that,
analyst that
Ari.
covers legal, and yeah, happy to see you.
I am Editor-in-Chief, editor of none, chief of all.
You need to be like global, the global editor in chief of all knowing legal tech and the oracle of legal technology.
That's it.
Wow.
That's
So
it.
we are what, 1 week post legal week?
Yes.
Seemed like a
Yes.
logical place to start.
Let's start at the very beginning. Yes, it was great. I thought Legal Week was success. Year one, first time in a new building. I think they delivered a great conference. I think the feedback was generally positive. The venue felt bigger and more capable of taking that number of people, and great sessions. I think it missed out on some of the networking because it's slightly in the middle of nowhere, and I think they'll have to remedy that hopefully next year in terms of maybe creating a bar area where people could convene. I think that, but I'm sure that I spoke to one of the ALM people, and I think they're going to be on it for next year. But what did you think?
I thought it was great. All in, great event. I have been going to Legal Week for 25 years, something like that. And as much as I finally became familiar with the Hilton and knew for sure that this was going to be different, I'm a New Yorker, so I know where the Javits Center is in relative to everything else in the city. And the only really constructive feedback there was just proximity, which isn't something you can really do anything about. So people will figure out how to navigate that part of the city. And that part of the city is really much more vibrant now. So a year from now, who knows? It's sort of like AI, right? It's rapidly changing, and there's lots of development there. And you hosted in a fantastic breakfast, and it was right across the street in a
Yeah.
in a Class A building. So there's space there that wouldn't have been possible 5 years ago. Certainly not 10 years ago. Certainly not when Legal Week started. And I well, I give real credit to the ALM folks because not easy to move venues like that after the community is so used to a single location that's essentially iconic in the history of this space. So I thought it was great, and actually the sessions were crowded, and I thought there was lots of visibility for lots of the vendors who were participating. It really worked out.
Yeah, I agree with you. The sessions were great, actually. I'm not normally, we go to so many of these things, and sometimes it's easy to just miss the sessions, to be frank with you, because you get caught up with the briefings, which are also really important. But I went to, I didn't go to as many sessions as I'd like. I did tons of briefings, but the sessions I saw from the agenda were great. I went to the very first session on the first day, which was fantastic, really well attended. You had people like Ilona Logvanova, who's the chief AI scientist at Herbert Smith Freehill Kramer. I feel like that whole thing was like the Herbert Smith Freehill Kramer. Still getting used to the HSFK. It was great, talking a bit about the next stages of AI and the kind of the realities. There were kind of some showstopper moments which came up in my breakfast, which maybe we'll come on to talk about. Which there was a guy on the stage who said one of the first times in public forum that people had heard someone say that he thinks that AI is going to mostly mean the end of lawyers, which it was a deliberately provocative statement. But I think that then carried on a lot of conversations, which was, whether you believe it or not, it was very there's nothing wrong with, I think people call them hot takes, don't they? It was a deliberately hot take, and it sparked, there were some really interesting conversations throughout the conference, which is what you're there for, whether you agree with what people say or not. It's what you're there for, the conversation.
Yeah, and I also think that there's a lot of truth in these predictions, but they may not be the final word. Like I just think there's going to be an end to what's the way we practice now. But that doesn't mean we won't practice anymore. That doesn't mean we won't exist. I just do think that we are at an inflection point, and that was obvious from the discussions at the event. Every topic kind of reflected this sea change, and most people, it seemed to me, uh, accept it and are trying to figure out how to navigate the path forward. And I think we're past this sort of fear of it or what could be. I think we've accepted that we are not really capable of predicting what could be because it's changing so quickly, and we're okay in some ways working in this fluid environment. So I mean, the conference kind of validated some of those points.
I think the interesting and conversation in relation to this point, but with a lens of client relationships at my breakfast, which you were kind enough to come to.
And you were kind enough to invite me
I
to
was kind
attend.
enough to
So
invite you,
thank you.
Ari,
Yes,
Mr.
yes.
Klein. We also go. But so I hosted a breakfast with Latera, which was kindly hosted by Millbank. Robert Carwick was amazing. And although it was very early for a lot of people, but the topic was client relationships in this new era, and it got quite, it was quite heated. I liked the fact that it got heated that time in the morning, which was great, over what client relationships and management really look like. And some people would really sort of saying, will client relationships matter in the future? Is it all going to come down to data? There was some deliberately provocative analogies with Waymo, that you would rather get a taxi that's on time and plays your music, and you don't really care who the driver is. And then there's this thought that actually, when we've all got advanced technology, what's going to be the differentiator? Actually, it's still going to be those personal relationships on top of that. And that's kind of where I think I sit, and that it's a matrix of it's the leveling out. It's making sure that you're as efficient as possible. That clients will not tolerate firms who haven't used data to make sure that they're providing an efficient service. So there'll be all of that, but actually, I still believe that once you've leveled out, the wheat from the chaff, that actually that relationships will play a huge part. It's just that there won't be any kind of fat. That's what I think. But it was fascinating. I thought it was a good conversation.
Well, it was a great conversation, and I also really liked the way that you curated it so that it wasn't just legal tech or legal practitioners. I remember there was perspectives in business development, there's perspective in marketing, and client service really requires this, sort of cross-disciplinary perspective to make sure that the firm is providing the best possible service. And it got me thinking because I have been very lucky to be doing this research, which is coming out in a few days. It'd probably be out by the time this airs, but it's about ROI and how you measure the return on your investments, particularly in legal AI, but it really crosses over into just making this calculus for all technology that you're investing in. And one of the essential components for doing that is really drawing data and perspectives from across the firm, not just from legal tech or KM or innovation, although those are essential, but from finance and from marketing and from business development. And that was the conversation that you really moderated, and it was great. It was really meaningful.
Oh, thank you. That was obviously completely intentional. As is
Well, that's
everything
what
I
I love, the
say.
serendipity of that. I love the serendipity of sort of like soup, putting all a bunch of different
Yeah.
ingredients and coming up with something that you hadn't expected or that was unique. And I like, I like the sort of the process of putting that together.
It was intentional, but at these things you could never guarantee. As you know, these conferences, there's so much competition, and it was obviously a lot of effort, and then some luck in terms of the fabulous people who showed up. I think, yeah, ROI. It's interesting. I'll be interested to read your report, Ari, because obviously this is the year. There seems to be, like you said, that there's less sort of, the conversations have matured, as you and I have already talked about. ROI continues to be an interesting topic. It's interesting because I've been doing a lot more in-house work, and for in-house ROI is everything. For private practice, still not as much. Very unusually to anything that's ever happened before in terms of tech. So that's still kind of a source of fascination for me right now. But speaking to the in-house teams, they're very much focused on ROI. It's been that dynamic. It's come through at all of the conferences. The sort of like the in-house law firm shift, and the balance in terms of who's doing what and what that looks like going forward. That continues to be an interesting theme, including at this conference, I think.
The other thing that I find really interesting, and I keep hearing as a theme for this year, is orchestration, right? This idea of someone, whether it's some of the law firm rock stars, you named one of them, but some of these individuals who are so adept at knowing the tools and knowing where they apply and understanding the firm's different practice areas, both domestically and all over the world, frankly, that they can help the firm navigate through this process and through the tools. And so this idea of orchestration, I saw a great blog post yesterday by the folks at Simplify who really described it very well, and you're increasingly seeing that, because once you can navigate the process of orchestration, you can much better figure out where are we getting value, where could we add value, but you need sort of a navigator, and that's really what we're going to start to see this year. We're in just at the end of the first quarter, but my sense is that when we have our year end, we should be so lucky. We have our year end discussion. We will, I'm sure, be talking about how we've moved through these
Yeah.
stages into this process of just moving across the board and recognizing how these tools are being used, which are most effective for which organizations, and where there are best practices.
Yeah. And also, so the data, that I had a great chat yesterday about data lakehouse. So there's been a lot of chat already about how do firms make sure that the quality of their data is uniform for a start across the firm. There's so much conflicting data, and it means that it's very hard to do anything with it. You've got CRM data, you're doing things multiple times across multiple different systems with multiple different versions of what that data looks like. So there's I chatted yesterday with Tom Baldwin from Integrata. They're doing some really cool stuff, and I've had previous conversations with iManage about this sort of thing as well, about the benefits you can get of having this sort of consolidated data, where you can then start to make sure that it's all accurate and consistent. Obviously, you've got governance, to make sure that you can only access certain things. But I mean, that's kind of a fascinating area for me, isn't it? Because we talked about data a lot, and how you make sure that the data is in a good enough state. There's all sorts of different flavors of that conversation, but I think this is really interesting. Seems to be a recurring theme.
And of course, we are in an environment where there's lots of M&A activity in law firms. So you are having situations where a firm finally figures this out, and then they merge or are acquired, and it starts
Yeah.
all over again. So becoming adept at that process is an increasingly valuable skill in law firms because of the movement. Also, people are moving, and certainly this is a time of year where they do that. And there could be frustration or appreciation, depending on which side you're on, for what a firm is doing because of an experience they had at a prior organization. So there isn't parity in this yet. And so it's becoming a differentiator in some organizations.
Yes, definitely. So what else caught your attention? Anything? I think we issued a report on e-discovery, obviously area that you're more involved in than me normally, but we published a report, tar to har, asking whether Gen AI will stand up to forensic analysis, which was written by my colleague Neil Cameron, which has caused a lot of interest in terms of, can technology assisted review and the frameworks apply to Gen AI? I think you and I may have touched upon this before the conference, but it was interesting. We shared that report, and I know that Neil's had some reach out behind the scenes from some of the key players to talk about that. And there was one thing we did write about, was a session at Legalweek where there was a mock trial, and they came out on the side that TAR can be used to the framework and the understanding, etc., etc., to sort of in terms of Gen AI, but Neil very strongly disagrees because AI evolved and Gen AI in terms of its predictability, its repeatability, so many different factors is quite different. So that was quite interesting.
Yeah, and I'm actually in the process of finishing my annual e-discovery unfiltered report. This is the 12th year. And when I ask about trends, when I ask about areas of investment, when I ask about areas of spend, it's really focused on generative AI. So there's really, it's sort of unquestioned that in the coming year, that will, in e-discovery certainly be a massive part. I'm the lucky to serve as the chairman of the Global Advisory Board for ACEDS, and we do a regular webinar series once a month on Fridays at 2 p.m. I asked the president, what's the least popular time slot that I can have to feature our board members, just so I wouldn't impede on whatever their business is. And it turns out to be a really popular time. Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern. You'd be shocked. I think we had 250 or 70 registrants last week, and at least over 100 that showed up. And we had a conversation about, usually we have an AI and you series, and in that discussion we have our board members talking about applying AI in e-discovery in your career, just the different versions of where that might apply in that series. And there's a lot of interest and people want to get ahead. And so I think that, the report is helpful. I obviously, as a market researcher, I think research is really valuable because you can tell a story with data and perspectives that's essentially neutral. The data speaks for itself. 50% of people are either doing something or they're not, or it's 20%, but you're not just creating a fiction of how many people are doing something. They're telling you, and I think that that's a really important way for people to make decisions, especially rapid decisions, because the market's moving so quickly.
Yeah, you should share alongside when we publish this. You should share some of the links to your research because we talk about it, but it'd be great to sort of see that when it comes out as well. Your e-discovery report.
Yeah, and my e-discovery report is very inside baseball. Because I'm speaking. We all I was lucky in the early part of my career. I feel like I was mentioning this to someone recently, but I started writing about legal tech in the late 90s, and so when it was sort of practice management software or something, but e-discovery or litigation support kind of tool. So I've been lucky to know many of the folks in the space for quite some time and rely on their expertise. And, we're all fascinated by how fast it's moving because
Yeah.
when TAR came out, it took a while. It was years of movement, and then until Judge Peck really validated its use, people are waiting now for that to happen with generative AI, and so we'll continue to kind of follow it. But I would imagine it'll happen more quickly and exciting. But there are opportunities. I think that was one thing. I mean, if we close the loop here on Legal Week, I think
Mm.
that I left feeling like there are lots of opportunities. I know that people feel like there are lots of missed opportunities because things are happening so fast. But because they're happening so fast, there's yet another corner to turn onto, and that presents an opportunity. And I got the sense there was a lot of optimism from this year's Legal Week conference. There's obviously a lot of investment in the space. The show floor was just incredible. It just reflected a renaissance of legal tech, if you will, and it was exciting. So I left feeling optimistic and looking forward to what's coming next. Although, having gone there so many times, there was Legal Week, and then you felt a little bit of a void because there weren't other events, but now there's something every week, every few days. And
Yeah,
so,
too much.
it's you'd see people. I don't know. I don't actually know if it's too much. They're just a lot. So, so it's accessible. I think that's the point. It's accessible. If you couldn't come to New York for legal tech at the time, you missed out on something really big. But now, even though it's still a significant event in the calendar, there's something the following week and the following week, and there's other things to happen.
I was looking whilst you spoke to wrap up on a quote from our friend O's on the subject of sort of a key takeaway, but just real quick on the subject of conferences. So I'm going to see you at Lexpo, which is
The
excitement
10th anniversary
ensues.
of Lexpo. I am so excited and proud of my friend, the producer Rob Amirun, for starting this in 2016. I have to say, I shed a little tear here because in 2016, when I was lucky to speak there the first time, my daughter came with me, and at the time she was 10, I think. And so there are pictures from this conference of me walking around with this 10-year-old child, and everyone was wondering, like, what is this child doing there? And my daughter was so funny. She was so well behaved. She was so great to join me. And every break, Rob had this very creative idea to have a different theme of that break. So it would be one break would be a candy bar, one break would be a cupcake bar, one break would be, chocolate covered pretzels or something or snacks like that. And my daughter loved that. And so after every
Oh,
break, we'd go back to sit in the session and she'd just have piles of candy or cupcakes. And she just thought it was the greatest thing ever. And it was really a lot of fun. I always hope that she will be able to come back with me. But now, thankfully she's
oh.
doing her thing and successful and she'll be working, but I would love to take someone back because it's just such a great event. I'm so excited that you'll be there.
Well, now you've got me. So I'm going to be there going running around, embarrassing you by grabbing like armfuls
Yeah,
of
just whatever the
chocs.
candy is at the time. Well, now they have, what is that brand? Tony Chocoloni. Like people are giving
Ah,
away,
I
they give
know.
away Dopper bottles as it's such a great event, and it's such high level conversation of doers, like really, really smart people who are in the trenches with the trust of their leaders, joined by their leaders, and there's a very, very smart group of leaders at a firm in Belgium that I often see because they sit in the same spot and we're always making just a great, people know each other now and so there's a sort of like a family atmosphere, but also more people coming in because they recognize and they've heard over the years what a uniquely valuable experience it is. So excited to see
Absolutely.
you there. It's going to be
I
great.
cannot wait. And the last time I saw Rob was on a boat in a lightning storm at Iltacon all those years ago. So I cannot wait to see him. But so as a wrap up, I guess, I wanted to share, what our takeaway. So our friend Osban Amram, who ex chief knowledge officer at White and Case and then Simpson Thatcher, he said, and I thought this was really interesting about a key takeaway. It was again from the breakfast, but to be honest, this could be from the conference. He said, I see many asking the wrong question. How do we keep up with AI? Sorry, how do we keep up with AI is a treadmill. It breeds anxiety, reactive purchasing, and adoption theatre, tracking prompt counts instead of value created. The right question is harder. What can we now offer that was genuinely impossible before? Not faster or cheaper, new. I'm like, I think that's going to be, I'm going to pin that up somewhere. It's pretty cool. And something to think about for
I'm a, I'm
everybody.
a, I'm a, I'm a, I, like you, I'm a huge fan of O's. He's a regular attendee at my Legal Tech Mafia breakfast and just a wonderful mentor of mine. And I will say that I have this report coming out with Legora in a couple of days or whenever. I'm not exactly sure when we'll post this, but it it really does answer some of that, or at least spark my hope, as I know is your hope, is to spark a conversation to make the challenges that people are facing, whether they're in law firms or law departments, frankly, feel accessible, not out of reach, and not limited to just the general counsel or the CEO or managing partner, but or frankly the rock stars of KM and innovation that are really driving change in our space right now, but for everyone to sort of chip away at what it means to get value from technology, what it means to deploy these wonderful AI tools, but with an eye towards not only how is it making them more productive, how is it increasing the value, the time they spend, how is that really resulting in greater benefits to the firm and ultimately to a wonderful experience for the client. So I was just spot on, and I'm excited to produce some research that's going to hopefully create that more of that conversation. And Caroline Hill, it's always a privilege. I'm excited for our next discussion. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ari. Great chatting with you.